Got Dale in London.
Yes, I'm here.
All right. Hello.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad, thanks. I just got a couple questions actually. I was a Christian for years and years, like come from a very religious background. My mum has 3 sisters. They're married to ministers, like proper into it. I used to work in a church, and probably about a year ago, I think I read. Well, I didn't think I read. I did read the Dawkins book, The God Delusion, and thought there's not too much in there I don't disagree with at all. And from there became, like, what you class as an atheist. This was about a month before my Christian wife and I got married, and she was just like, "Are you really serious? Like, is this? Are you don't believe anymore?" And I was like, "I don't think I do." We got married anyway, but one of the things that things are good, but one of the things that is kind of difficult for us is that we used to pray together, and now we don't, because obviously I can't. So it's I was just wondering, do you have anything, or do you know of something that you would do that would replace that? I understand, like, the psychological reasoning for why praying with somebody is building and is good for you from a relationship point of view. Do you know of anything sort of that doesn't go from that sort of down that route?
Well, my wife and I play video games together sometimes, but I don't think that's what you're looking for.
This reminds me of I think it was Stephen Covey that wrote a story about him and his wife, and he was saying something about how they set aside this certain time once a week where they sat and told each other things that they thought, and the purpose of the exercise was that whatever the other person told you, you could not, like, criticize it, you couldn't, question, you just had to be supportive of, like, whatever they were telling you in that hour.
That's a common thing that counselors will tell you to do, is just, sit down together and talk about what's important to you, and don't argue about it, just listen.
Yeah, and I mean, that could potentially be a really difficult thing, especially in a situation where, you've come to lose that belief and she still has it, but it might be a safe space for you guys to air your differences in a way that you just don't even argue about it. She can express herself, you can express, and it doesn't even have to be religious, it could be other things too, like you or her might have something that you think the other one might not react well to. And it's like you just talk about it, and it's like the other partner just is supportive.
That's great, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I think that in addition to that, because I think actually you should do that in your marriage no matter what. I think not enough people do that kind of thing. But additionally, it is good to have some common interests. And I think what you've lost is you had that common interest of praying together, and now that's just something that you don't both like anymore.
How often did they? How often did you guys do that?
It wasn't the thing. It wasn't like we sat on Monday night and sort of thrashed it out or anything. But it was kind of like if we had an issue, or we just sometimes we went to bed together, and it was just like we want to go to sleep, maybe thinking about praying, And It was one of those, it was an ad hoc thing that we used to be able to go back to, and always found it quite encouraging and building.
Right.
I understand.
But
it's just like,
I've been married twice, and in both cases there have been things that we started out both liking, and then we lost that common interest for one reason or another. But that's okay, because despite the kind of traditional romantic notion that you basically become one person when you get married, you don't, and you don't have to do everything together. But you should try, I think if you don't have any common interests right now that you share, you should actively seek some out, whether it's a particular Netflix show that you both become fans of, or it's a physical activity like, I don't know, bowling, or you're in England, so cricket. I jokingly tossed out the fact that my wife and I play video games together. That's not for everyone, but it is an activity that we both enjoy, and the fact that we're doing it together kind of gives us some togetherness time that is just, we're setting aside this particular time to be together. And now I feel like I'm talking to you less about atheism, but about relationship counseling. So I think that it would be fair to say that you should also think about getting a real qualified counselor instead of me.
Well, except that he doesn't sound like he's saying that, the marriage is doing horribly. It sounds like he's just saying, well, there's these weird little things that have shifted. I mean, is that about correct, or is there bigger issues?
Absolutely. I mean, I've only been sort of.
But I'll tell you,
one I know.
A counseling session can be a fun thing. Like, if that's something that you guys want to do, I encourage that.
I'm not saying that the counseling should be a last resort as an emergency to fix things that are about to break. I'm saying that it's good to get counseling in a preemptive sort of way if it's available to you.
Yeah. I mean, it was more a case of sort of like you touched on it. It's nothing sort of really hugely bad. It's just that I know that she misses that, and sort of I don't want her to sort of feel like she's missing out just because we don't believe the same thing now. And I suppose just because I knew that, like, having listened to your show, I knew that at least you, Tracie, I think you used to be Christian, so I figured like, well, if you knew like the sort of what would replace the praying thing in that sort of way, and what you said was really helpful, and I think that is definitely something I will suggest to her. So that's really helpful. Thanks a lot.
Good.
Do you have time for one more?
Yeah,
question?
You said you had something else.
Sure.
Yeah. I've I don't know if you guys have seen. Please don't hang up on me when I say this, but I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Zeitgeist. The movie.
Click.
But
no, just kidding.
Yeah, fair enough. I appreciate the guy that did it might be a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. I don't know why, the feeling I get from it. But the first part of it talks about all the religions that predate Christianity that had the same thing, like born of a virgin, died on the cross, had 12 disciples, and all these different things. I literally saw that probably about 4 months after I became an atheist, and I sat and I thought, how am I only hearing this now? Because it seemed to be quite a big deal, and I looked it up. And it does seem to check out, but nobody really that I sort of...
I'm sorry.
Sorry, say that?
I'm sorry, but there are arguments to be made that are somewhat credible from the point of view that maybe Jesus never existed and was based on a conglomeration of fictional characters. But Zeitgeist does not have that academic credibility in any way. It brings in a whole bunch of spurious stuff that that you can find if you look up stuff like Zeitgeist debunked, and don't just assume that they're from a pro-Christian point of view. Basically, I actually recently had a brief exchange with Richard Carrier, who I met a couple of years ago, because somebody on Twitter was saying to me, this guy is telling me that pretty much every credible historian agrees that Jesus really existed, that there is a strong consensus that there was a real character behind Jesus. What should I say against him? And I was like, don't say anything against him, because he is actually right. I will be the first to say that the evidence marshaled in favor of a historical Jesus is not the greatest historical evidence I ever saw, but historians do tend to have a general consensus on that, and I'm talking secular historians. And I asked Richard Carrier to back me up on this, and he said, oh yeah, I'm super duper in the minority, and I have not managed to, make enough of a case that it's turning around mainstream history yet. And I think I will eventually, but you're right. Don't try to argue that historians don't believe in a historical Jesus. Okay?
Yeah. I never sort of thought that, because, I mean, I kind of knew that he existed for real, but I didn't know, or I believed that he existed for real, but it was just when I saw that thing on Zeitgeist, and I thought, is that really true? Like, did loads of other religions predate Jesus and still have this born of a virgin, died on a cross? Is that then not so much the case? He's kind of just clumped it all together and has made it up, sort of thing. Is that right?
It's mixed.
Yeah, I'd take it with a grain of salt. And if you don't have if you can't vet one of those claims with a good, EDU source, don't use it. We actually have gotten mail. I remember one guy in particular who wrote to us and was extremely upset because he had laid down these arguments to his father, who's religious, and his dad said, "I want to see your sources." And when they went looking, they really couldn't find any credible sources to support a lot of what he had claimed, and he was very upset, and he came to us saying, you know, where's the support for this?
How can I dig myself out of this hole I've got?
And I said, hey, we didn't make the film, right? So I didn't make the claim, and I can't tell you how to support claims that you put forward from another person that you didn't vet yourself.
Right.
Yeah, because I'd watched it and I was quite amazed by it, but then I thought, right, well, this wasn't in the God Delusion, which seemed to cover everything that did and didn't seem relevant, and that surely should have been in there if it was one of those things that was, because that would be a pretty big deal, right? If you had like this sort of historical evidence. And it wasn't in that. I never really ever hear you guys talk about it. I occasionally sort of listen to non-profits as well and a few other things, and I was like, nobody ever talked about it, and I thought, this is weird that nobody else is seeming to jump on this bandwagon. So I thought I'd better check it out.
I mean, the scholarship on it is kind of shaky and up in the air. But Zeitgeist is especially not credible. It's full of a ton of... I mean, it's got so much nonsense that it's not even worth your time to try to sort out which is real and which is nonsense.
The other thing to always remember is that if something predates something else, if you have two similar ideas and one predates the other, that doesn't necessarily indicate that one influenced the other. So this is really important because there's a lot of resurrection myths and some suggestion that those myths come out of agricultural societies, right? So they have this concept of death and rebirth because of how they live. Whereas, you know, certainly there are some myths, and I wouldn't doubt resurrection myths, especially when you're looking at like Greek and Roman mythologies, that do influence each other. But you've got to be able to demonstrate the connection there. It's not just enough to say, you know, hey, this reminds me of this other thing, therefore it has to be reliant upon this other thing. It could just be that there is, in fact, some sort of universal between two cultures that give rise to something very similar.
Yeah. If you do want to read a somewhat credible source about the possible non-historicity of Jesus, I mentioned Richard Carrier, and we're not at the public access studio, so I'm totally going to say buy this book. His latest book is from 2014, and it's called On the Historicity of Jesus, Why We Might Have Reason for Doubt. And notice how tentative the title is, even for a guy who's basically promoting that.
And it was written for peer review. So and this was a book that was intended for peer consumption.
Right. So I would say this is the most useful thing you can read if you want to make your case, probably.
Okay, brilliant. That's cool. Thanks ever so much for that, guys. I'll let you get on with somebody else, and thanks for taking my call. It's been really helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for calling.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.